thank you for coming to this Evolution of Sport Talk with Kevin Goodfellow from Sports Data Hub, who's also one of the sponsors for the Sports Analytics Conference this year. He will be talking about secrets of sports analytics, which is clearly drawing a nice large crowd. So take it away, Kevin.
Thanks. Good to see a good crowd here. I got a lot of interest throughout the day. My name's Kevin Goodfellow. I'm the founder of Sports Data Hub. We started Sports Data Hub 5 years ago. I have 16 years of experience with data and analytics, and as Malcolm said this morning, I put in my 10,000 hours of being a data architect and doing data integration. So I think the theme of evolution in sports for these talks is perfect, because sports analytics is growing and adoption is accelerating. But there's been a few thought leaders that have basically been pushing this along and basically proving out the value of it. And Billy Beane's one of those people. In London several months ago, he was on a panel and was talking about when Moneyball came out, his competitive advantage that he had built up over time started to erode. And he realized that he had to continually do more to keep ahead of everyone, so essentially evolving what he's doing continuously. And all the leaders have been doing this. And I just wanted to share with you today some of the challenges that they're facing, and then the foundation of the solution for how you tackle these big problems. So the three issues that they're tackling are width, depth, and speed. So width is the concept of data diversity. So as you've probably seen today, there's lots of different various topics that people are studying. There's physiology, there's biology, there's psychology, there's scouting data, there's training data, there's salary cap data. It goes on and on and on, and that's only going to get bigger. So the scope that people are working with is constantly going to increase. And the more of these analytics that we do, the more variables you're going to want to put into your model, your equation. So connecting all of that width and these disparate data sources is important. It's hard to do. Depth is the second problem they're dealing with, and this is increased data detail. So this is some of the data points that you're getting from maybe automatically generated systems. For example, in baseball, there's pitch tracking. So several hundred times a second they're tracking. Sports Vision is actually tracking the position of the ball. In soccer and now in baseball, they're tracking the position of the players. Just last week at the NFL Combine, Under Armour released their shirt that has some technology in it that records your heart rate, your breathing rate, G-forces in your position. So there's a lot of mechanically generated data that's being created, and you have to handle that as well. And that has some kind of unknown potential that we really haven't figured out how we're going to use all those kind of biometric and positional data together. However, it poses a data volume issue. And then the third issue is that they want to do this faster. So they want to acquire the data, process it, analyze it, and then present it to the decision makers faster. So whoever can do those kinds of things faster is going to win. So these are the things that they're trying to tackle. Foundation-wise, there's three pieces. The first piece is data management. So this is acquiring, moving, organizing, cleaning, and connecting fragmented data into a form that enables deeper analysis. And I'm personally biased to this piece because it's the piece that most people ignore or overlook and don't think has a lot of value. But when you look at it, this probably has 3/4 of the value in analytics. Anyone that's doing these mathematical analyses, 90% of the work that they do is this. Then 5 or 10% is the actual mathematical equation. So if you can alleviate this burden of data management and do this more efficiently, then you're going to be in much better shape. So I have a little metaphor that I'd like to walk through that explains it in a non-technical way, kind of the challenges of this particular piece. So say, for example, that we're a supplier of shoes. So we're essentially a middleman that provides shoes to stores that sells them to consumers, and so we buy them from, say, shoe manufacturers. And our manufacturers give us these shoes in this form. So at the factory, they create a pile for us. It has women's shoes, it has men's shoes, non-matching shoes, big shoes, little shoes, a pile of shoes. If we get a request from a store asking for a certain type of shoe in certain various sizes, we have to go to the factory, manually pick through this pile, and figure out what we can get, put it in a box, send it over. It's a horribly inefficient way of doing things, especially if you have a lot of orders from your customers. So what we really want to do is to find a way to pick up this pile of shoes from the manufacturer, bring it to our warehouse, and automatically sort through it so that we can create something like this so that we know where all of our shoes are. They're in a box, they're labeled, certain types of shoes, the size. So when we get an order, we can quickly look to see what we have and provide it. So this is essentially an efficiency approach. It's not sexy, but this is what is really required to make this whole system work and to address width, depth, and speed. Width would be maybe you have more factories that you get shoes from. Depth would be the size of your order from each factory. And then speed would be how quickly can you get it from the factory to your warehouse to the consumer. Right? So that is the problem that we're tackling. And businesses have been tackling this forever, and that's where a lot of my experience comes from with Fortune 500 companies and for the last 5 years focusing on sports. So this is a big deal, and this is the part that I think people should focus more on. Second piece is the analysis piece. So this is discovering and monitoring metrics that describe team performance, behavior, strategy, value, or success. So this can be mathematical or statistical, but it could be even more simplistic than that, where you're essentially monitoring a metric. So a GM can do analysis, although it might be different than what the statistician or the mathematician is going to do from analytics point of view, right? I'm not going to talk a lot about that. There's plenty of presentations that talk about the mathematics behind it. But what the first part does is give you a foundation to do this second part. And with regard to width, depth, and speed, the analysis phase essentially allows you to narrow your focus. So the width and the depth, if you analyze what's important and what isn't important, you can focus on what you should be focusing on and not what you aren't. So this massive volume of data that you may be dealing with, you can kind of funnel it into something that's more important and look at just that. So it helps you deal with that, the size. It also helps you deal with the speed. So if you're only looking at what matters and not looking at what doesn't matter, you can save a lot of time. And if you do this right, you could save more time than the next guy. The third piece is visualization. And there's kind of two pieces of this, but this is essentially presentation of data metrics results in an interactive visual form for fast exploration, understanding, and action. So in the end, you do all of this to make a decision, right? And the decision makers aren't necessarily statisticians and mathematicians. They're business people. And the way that most people communicate, almost all people communicate, is through things that you see. So rather than looking at a pile of numbers in a spreadsheet, more and more and more and more numbers with all this data that's coming in, it's just not humanly possible to grind through that anymore. You have to consolidate it somehow. And the visual way of doing that is a good way of doing it. So you might, rather than do this, you might do something simple, you know, like this graph that can show you 3 or 4 things all at once. It shows you, in this case, it's home and away is the darker color or the orange, and then there's some average lines that go across. So something fairly simple is conveying a lot of information all at one time, but it's easy to understand. You can get a little bit more complicated and give kind of more of a analyst kind of a view. I'm not sure how well this is a bubble chart. Again, it's not that fancy, but again, if you're technical, you can see 3 dimensions all at one time. I don't have an example, but the other category of visualizations are more for maybe GM or business types where it's more of a profile. So it's not a technical presentation like this. It's more of a summary. Show me the high-level things that I need to know about a particular player or a particular team or a particular situation. And they could quickly, at a glance, maybe every day, look at it, see if there's any problems, and drill in or look in more detail in areas they want to study. And so this is the final piece, and this is where the rubber meets the road, where you're communicating what it is that you've done in the first 2 previous steps. If you don't do this well, you might as well not do the other 2 steps. So the bottom line is that the foundation for analytics is data management, the analysis or analytics piece, and then the visualization piece. And these 3 pieces are standard no matter whether you're a small team or a big team. If you're smaller, you do this in a smaller way, knowing that over the time you'll grow and you'll grow into something bigger. But these are the 3 components that they focus on. So I thought I'd share that with you, and that's all I had.
Thanks, Kevin. We have some time for some Q&A. If anyone has any questions for Kevin, I can bring the mic over to you. Any questions? Yep.
Hi, Kevin. Do you think in many of the sports, the analysis side is being done almost so much where part one is being ignored and they rely on outside suppliers to do it for them rather than internally try and manage it?
Yeah, and the traditional way of doing it is that they potentially have different sources. Some of them are internet, copy-paste. Others are paid sources that they get feeds from. And they manually try to combine it, usually in a spreadsheet. It's usually where they start. And they reach the point where that's not feasible anymore. There's a lot of clubs that have reached the limit of what spreadsheets can do. The information is too diverse. To update it in a spreadsheet takes too long. And they end up hiring more and more people to try to do this manual labor when really they have hit the barrier of what a spreadsheet can do and need to take that jump to a database kind of approach. It's kind of scary because they don't usually have a background in that area. Databases are not scary if you have worked with them before and you work with someone that knows what they're doing. But yes, that's a very common scenario. And more often, more and more teams are going to be bumping into that problem and are going to need to take that next step.
Any other questions?
Hi, Kevin.
Hey, Howard.
So it seems that what teams, what other users of these analytics really need to think about is kind of a model or framework of proceeding from collecting these data to analyzing them and then presenting them. But more importantly, assembling the data together in a coherent way.
Yep.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I mean, and that's the critical step that isn't something that a lot of people think about. But the integration of these diverse data sets is difficult. What you represent, one player in one system is completely different than another player, or the same player in another system. And that's where it takes expertise. I've spent 10 years doing that. And with Sports Data Hub, we built a sports-specific solution that tackles that difficult problem. So you don't need to know how to do that. You just need to know how to solve that problem. And that's kind of the area that we've chosen to focus on. Sports data, as you guys probably know, is horribly dirty. If you've ever been in the corporate world, it's bad enough, but sports data is terrible. And that's what we try to tackle, is to try to make that job a little easier. Here.
Nice job. I appreciated the presentation. I would add a fourth.
Oh, okay.
And that is implementation. And that's where the Billy Beans of the world have gained edges on their competition, and where MLB is catching up, and where NBA might want to go.
Yes.
But ultimately, data isn't of any use to anybody if it isn't used.
Yep.
And that's the big piece of what I think a lot of the conversations around this conference are about. And it's one that I would just continue to challenge all of us to keep working toward.
Mm-hmm. Is there a question in the back? I thought I saw one earlier. No. Any other questions for Kevin? Well,
great. Thank you.
And Kevin also had. Oh.
Oh, okay.